Okay, and welcome to lesson 6. So this, I'm going to go to our flow chart. If you remember back to the general overview of the assist approach, after the students completed the investigation and they have some data now, and that data is just these simple, was it hot or cool? Was the shade, I didn't make it cool? Data doesn't have to be hard numbers. It can just be simple observations. So what they're going to do here in lesson 6 is they're going to make their initial claim about what happened in the investigation. So what we have here is you're gonna start out, we have some prompts. I mean, obviously you don't have to follow these prompts word for word, but they're just some ideas to kind of get you started. But we want to get kids talking about the data they collected yesterday. So the prompt we have is based on the data that you collected yesterday from touching the rocks and the sand and the water or soil or whatever you did. How do you think the sun changes the temperature of objects and surfaces on Earth? Now, you might get good conversation from that. You might not. You might get kids just kind of sitting there not giving you anything. So, if that is the case, if you're not really getting good conversation, because remember, what we want is we want them to be arguing about why, certain things were hot and certain things were not. So you could give them this. You could say, well, if there was a slide and it was hot, why do you think it was hot? What was the thing that made the slide hot? And this actually is a part of your assessment, and we would say in trimester 2 and trimester 3 you might actually use this as assessment, but just to kind of introduce this concept since it's the first time that you're doing it, because this is what our formative assessments look like. So if we look here, this would be more kind of this part of it, but since this is the first time you're doing it, we talked about doing this as a class and trying to get this idea of here are multiple claims, let's decide which one has the best evidence, because that's really what we're trying to get here with this argumentation. So you could just pull this up in their thinking log and use this as a prompt to kind of get the conversation and have a more balanced argumentation in your classroom. Again, later on in the year, in trimester 2 and 3, hopefully they would come up with something to debate, or we could pose another question for them to debate. But for this first one, I suggest using this. So again, it's just, why is this slide hot? And claim 1 is the sun made it hot, and claim 2 is it's shiny. Okay, you're probably going to get more that are going to go towards this one, but you might get some here. I say, well, I think it's hot because it's shiny. And it's not the shininess that makes it hot, it's the heat from the sun that reflects off that shininess. But you don't want to tell them that. And actually the goal of this lesson is to ask students to, have claims that have evidence. And the evidence is going to be, a lot of them, just like observations and their experiences. You're going to want to go over those negotiation rules that we have. So, saying like, I agree with this person or I disagree with this person. You can have stuff like, we're debating ideas, not people. Claims have to have evidence. So, a claim like, well, I just think it's hot because it's shiny. And it's like, well, what's your evidence behind that? And if they go, I don't know. I'm like, well, can somebody else talk about that? Does anybody else think it's shiny? Well, what evidence do you have? And the evidence could be something as simple as when I touch it, when I touch shiny things or when I touch other shiny things, they're hot. Okay? And same thing with the sun. Even if everybody agreed with claim 1, let's say you get that scenario and every student agrees with claim 1, you still have to ask them to provide evidence. So even though if they're not directly arguing with each other, they can be somewhat arguing with you and say, well, okay, well, if the sun makes it hot, why do you know that? What's your evidence behind that? And hopefully they would kind of cite some things that they collected in the experiment about the things in the shade were cool and things like that. So what we want to do by the end of this lesson, we don't want to give them the answer. So that needs to be clear here. Your goal is to say, well, let's look and see what the experts say. And that's what we're going to do in the next lesson. You're going to look up the answer to this question there. So again, you're just asking them to provide evidence for their claims. And you're the first person doing this in kindergarten. This is going to be a practice they're going to do in K1 and 2 and hopefully beyond that.